Hey, Mike, how's it going?
Great, Frank. Good to see you.
Yeah, how was your week?
It was awesome. I had a great week. Getting ready for the Christmas time of the year.
I'm pulling Scrooge this year. I'm just gonna. I'll get
No
happy. I'll get happy on Christmas morning.
There you go. There you go.
Have a little kid down below just get me a goose. Do you ever eat a goose before?
Isn't that Scrooge? Are you mixing Scrooge and the Grinch?
No, I said Scrooge.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Grinch at
No,
first.
I'm pulling Scrooge this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's his name? Little Timothy? It's funny.
Yeah, actually, I had a couple of the ghosts come to me last night.
Well, it's funny. I was telling Kayla about this recently. I was I did a
Did
performance
I say
of Scrooge.
I meant to say Scrooge if I said.
Well, I don't remember. I did a performance of Scrooge when I was like in middle school, and I actually was Scrooge.
Oh, you were Scrooge?
Yeah,
oh,
I
right
was
on.
Scrooge. Yeah, I thought that was fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the Christmas time. This is my favorite time of the year by far. Everybody's in a great mood. I love the cold weather. There's something about wrapping up a year that I just love.
Yeah. All right. Cool, man. Yeah. I have to like it.
Forced.
Yeah. I try to play an indifference part all year round.
I like it.
It's all good to me.
So
until it's not.
Who are we covering today, Frank?
We're going to talk about Neville Goddard.
I love it.
Yeah.
Very important individual.
Yeah, so Neville Goddard for me was one of the first people that actually somebody gave me a book of his called Power of Awareness many, many years ago.
Okay. Do you remember who gave it to you?
I can't recall.
Client?
It was in New York.
Oh, okay.
I think it was I like to use the word perfect stranger. There was a gentleman I was talking to on the train coming back from the city, Long Island Railroad. I lived on Long Island, but I worked in the city.
Okay.
And we struck up a conversation, and he mentioned Neville Goddard, and because he was talking about stuff that was pretty interesting, almost weird, but interesting. And he mentioned Neville Goddard, so I got his book Power of Awareness, and that's how it was introduced. And it was interesting, very simple. I shouldn't say simple book, but it's a small book to read, but very complex. At the time, it was. Now I've been reading it for many, many years now, so. But it was one of those books that opened my mind to a different way of looking at the way we were taught, the way we were shown. Mm-hmm. Even he gets into the Bible, and the way we were actually taught how Scripture should be presented or perceived
and interpreted.
Yeah. So he changed the interpretation for me, which, I don't even look at his way as being better or right over somebody else's. It's just his perception of it. Of the Bible, when he talks about Scripture, works better in my journey along the way. It doesn't. You take the negative out. So that's what I like about it. So if you choose to look at it a certain way and you get what from it, that's fine. But we're here on Perspective Shift to show different perspectives. So, I love Neville Goddard.
See, that's awesome. Same type of thing. So Neville for me gave me a whole different way to interpret. What I had previously my entire life been taught, what the Bible was, how it was to be read, Christ's role, all of that. This was the first time I heard it from this type of interpretation, and it really resonated with me. For those listening, Neville Goddard, he believes the Bible is a parable of the human psyche. And so it's not something that is meant to be taken literally, but something as in a means of our journey.
Yeah, it wasn't historical.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. So he doesn't believe there's an external God. He believes, the God is within us, which is a lot of what the Scripture talks about when, you dive deep and have an open mind. This perspective is very powerful. At least it was for me. It resonated very much so in the sense that I don't know, like it felt right when I began to look at it from this perspective, and it was cool because it opened doors, and I found a lot of similarities between other spiritual teachings, other guidance, other teachers that I hear talk about it, Buddhists, all sorts of cultures. It kind of brings them together, and I thought that was a very unique take that Neville was able to provide those who normally came from like a Christian or like Frank and I, like a Catholic background, because we were taught the Bible a very specific way, and this helps to open the eyes. So
yeah. Well, what I got out of it was, he took the contradiction out of it for me, because I was taught with so much contradiction, and you didn't know it. Like he even talks about like imagination, and the way we contradict imagination in our society. It's like you'll take somebody that's famous, an artist, and like, man, they have a great imagination, so it has a positive connotation to it. But then it's like if somebody's milling around in school and say, "Hey, stop imagining and get back to work." So we heard both sides of it, and it's very contradicting. And what I'm finding out about life is, I don't care the origin of stuff, how it came about. I care about the disciplines and what it means by this. So there is both an East and a West. Mm-hmm. But which discipline am I going to choose? And one isn't better than the other, but it's the contradiction of keep going east and west and getting nowhere. Mm-hmm. And I think offering this up, this steadfast moment into life, he showed that to me. He was one of the first people I read that actually took the contradiction out and created a discipline behind the understanding of these principles. Mm-hmm. And where before it was like you were told you're the son of God, but you're a sinner at the same time, and you're going to be judged. I'm like, well, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm. Which is it?
Yeah, which is it? Am I good or am I bad? Mm-hmm. You're both. I'm like, well, you can't really head east and west at the same time. Mm-hmm. So west and east exist, but I can't do both at the same time, and that creates a contradiction. That's why I believe that a lot of people are in this lost in this world, because they haven't been taught the discipline just to move in the direction in which they choose and stay steadfast on it. And that directional move is the success, if that's what you want to call it, the feeling of it, not necessarily the specific direction. It's just that you're going this way, and then I should go this way, I should go this way. You could go 50 miles in one day, but end up in the same spot you started with.
Back and forth,
where you can go 50 miles in a direct way and gain a different perspective or multitudes of different experiences along the way. And that's the discipline of life. And obviously discipline in focusing, hitting the target is the opposite of sinning, where it's missing the target. Mm-hmm. So the contradiction was creating the sinner rather than the discipline focused. And when I started reading them, that's what was coming about. And I realized everyone that we've talked about on this podcast was showing different perspectives of how they're looking at it, but they're teaching you a steadfast discipline. And if you follow it, it will work. If you don't, it only works as far as it goes. Like, again, if you work out, go to the gym and work out, you'll be as healthy as you continue. Mm-hmm. But if you stop and wonder why it's not working,
there's your answer.
Yeah. Now, it's not that you stay on, like, we always move from one thing to the next, but it's the fulfillment of the discipline that creates the life worth living. And that's how I feel. So it helps me focus on stuff and shuts everything out. Because he gave me a whole different idea when he wrote a book. I found the audiobook online about the 12 disciples.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, and that was...
We were talking about this before we went on air.
Yeah, so the metaphor of that is kind of like you look at, it's the 12 qualities of the human mind. So each disciple represents a certain quality. And once fulfilled, once you fulfill that discipline, you move on. But the two that really stuck out to me, I don't want to get into all 12. The audiobook is on YouTube if you want to check out anybody out there.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's the 12 Disciples by Neville Goddard. But the two that stuck out to me that was always had some weird feeling to it. Like one was Thomas and the other one was Judas. Especially Judas.
Everybody's heard of Thomas.
Especially Judas.
Doubting Thomas, and then Judas, of course, betrayal.
And I always thought, like, why would Jesus choose, especially Judas, somebody like that to as a friend, as a disciple, for him to only be betrayed and put upon the cross because of this man. Mm-hmm. So why would that be in the story? Because if that's the narrative of the story, and if Jesus, this perfect human being that came down, the Son of God, if he couldn't get it right with Judas, what shot do we have? Mm-hmm. Like, so we're going to be betrayed as well?
At least that's how
it was perceived. Yeah, especially as a young kid.
And interpreted.
Yeah,
growing up, I was taught the exact same way.
Yeah, and same thing
Bible
with
school and all that, and in high school.
And so when I heard Neville Goddard's read his book, and it was like it gave me a whole different outlook on especially Judas. So just the idea of actually, overcoming, letting go of stuff. So and that's why, like Judas, his portrayal was the persona in which he's trying to get rid of. So he created suicide from that point, because Judas committed suicide after the portrayal of Jesus.
Okay.
So the portrayal is the old persona which isn't working for you, the contradicting persona. So you got two of them, one that wants to go this way, one that wants to go this way. And you must portray the one that isn't working in the disciplined way in which you want to go. So then suicide, the death of it, the letting go of that old concept of yourself.
The ego.
Yeah, so you let the old concept of your old self go. You create a suicide, then you move fully into the other one, and the discipline will return. That's the fulfillment. Probably why it was the last disciple we talk about. So it's a really, like, as you dive into that, yeah, it was like, wow, I was never told this from that perspective.
Well, what about the doubting Thomas?
Well, the doubting Thomas is you doubt the, it's kind of doubting what we considered information that doesn't fulfill you in moving in a direction. Like, in other words, you can't do this. Yes, I can. So doubt that information, the origin of the information that's coming through, you doubt it in order to fulfill.
If it doesn't align with your vision, your imagination.
Exactly.
I love that.
So
That's
all
powerful.
what we consider all negative information. See, like, let's take a COVID.
Yeah.
COVID's a great example, because he uses like a plague, but Neville Goddard died many years ago before COVID even existed. So he's talking about other plagues. But the one who is the doubting Thomas, so if you take the concept of the disciplined mind of Thomas, he doubted anything would happen to him with this plague. He was aware of the outbreak of it to talk about, but his disciplined mind disallowed it from infecting him, his mind, and then infecting his body. So it was complete doubting of that and moving steadfast in the direction of what we would call health, in the direction, or in the instance of a plague.
Which this is quite the opposite of what we were taught,
Yeah.
Doubting Thomas was doubting Christ himself.
Yeah,
not
he was doubting
the
it.
concept around him.
Yeah, he was. So, because in the world of like this, health and sickness, right? Mm-hmm. So which one do you want? You want health. So you have to doubt sickness. If you stay steadfast and disciplined on the doubting of sickness, health will be yours.
Yep.
And these are principles. Actually, we know this, but because we were taught these contradicting informations, like all of a sudden we start to believe in them. We believe in them. They actually back it up. Because someone's like, roughly every November I get sick. And they fulfill that cycle. Well, it's a belief, so you're gonna get sick to some degree. But I also ask, you get the same sickness? Well, of course not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course not. Right?
Of course not. Last year it was this year it was that. But yet they almost prepare themselves in that, but we didn't have the discipline. And again, I'm one of those people. The discipline to actually say, no, I am not going to get sick. So you doubt the fact that you're going to get sick. But it's not just about saying it. It's about fully immersing yourself in it.
Full faith.
Fully. And that's why, part of like the practices I do every day, like meditation, just focus on breathing or focus on a sound, creates the ability for the mind to be disciplined to look in the other direction. Where there's so much stuff going on around me, I'm able to just hold that out and keep going. And that's when negative information comes in. Say, like with my business, something happens. I'm like, well, I'm just going to keep moving.
Yeah.
Right. And I get tripped up. And when I get tripped up, I see it start moving in that direction. So I'm like, oh, shit, this is physics. This isn't philosophy. This is physics, people. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that? We have to discipline the mind. We have to train the mind. And the 12 dispensations, or the 12 disciplines of the mind, we laid out in the 12 disciples. When you start to go through all of them, what they mean, and how to discipline, and when you conquer them, you actually become the Christ mind. Yeah. All right? You might be there for a second and get there, but the goal isn't to finish it. The goal is to study it for the rest of your life.
And I like how you ended that, because that's the truth. These are all tools to help us achieve Christ consciousness. Buddha nature, enlightenment, awakening. These are all terms that we're all talking about the same thing.
Yeah, and to make it simple, we'll talk about like Buddha, it's to make your life more enjoyable. It's to make you happier. Like if you have control of your discipline, you actually have fun. A child on the playground is very disciplined in their play. This isn't like rigorous stuff. It may seem rigorous in the beginning when you're working it out because of the contradiction. Like
of what
people
we've
like,
been taught and what we're used to.
Yeah, so a lot of us are walking in this direction, but looking over our shoulder in case something hits. And I'm like, yeah, but you never get hit behind you. You actually trip in front of the curb that's in front of you because you're looking behind you. And then you blame it. I'm like, oh shit, see, stuff happens. I'm like, because you weren't disciplined enough to look at in front of you to where the curb you would have stepped upon it rather than tripped upon it. Yeah. So it is about learning to just stay focused and shut everything out. And especially in this day and age, there is so much coming at us.
It's hard too.
A lot more than when I was a kid. And it's tough to perceive what the children of today are dealing with because, I can only anticipate. And just like, my grandparents had to, come up with some idea of our generation, right? Mm-hmm. Was it accurate? I don't know, When my grandparents, what the hell's wrong with you kids today? I'm like, well, I don't know. Is there something wrong with us? Like I didn't think anything was wrong with me.
Totally.
But as I start to look, I'm like, yeah, there's so much coming out. Maybe the kids today are coming in are so much greater at dealing with it. That seems to be the way. I don't know. But you also hear a lot of kids are on antidepressants, anti-anxiety, where when I was a kid, you may have heard of one or two kids on Ritalin because they couldn't sit down, But you didn't hear too much about the antidepressant. Maybe they were. They just didn't talk about it when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. So I really can't talk of that. But I know me personally, when I started focusing on an area in my life and kept going, it wasn't, things worked out from the physical manifestations, everything. That was great. But there was something else going on deeper, more spiritual, and I was engulfed into that. I was lost in it. Like as a child, when I was playing at the playground, the object wasn't to see how many swings I could get in, how deep I could dig the sandbox. It wasn't about that. So a lot of times we set these premises out there to perhaps get lost in them, but the goal isn't to how much money you can make. The goal is to how you can get into the flow of abundance and stay there. And how long can you stay there?
Well, and that's the world we really grow up in, and at least in the Western culture, at least that's how I feel it's the world we grew up in, is the main goal is make as much money as you possibly can. That's the point of life, and that's not the point of life. And you begin to dive into you find this whole other half of you. Like how I kind of see it is, we live in such like this left brain world where it's like you said, measured, certain metrics you have to meet, I got to go to school, this needs to happen, etc. And we're just constantly checking off this like checklist, like, all right, next, and we're just always going.
But those are part and parcel. Yeah, but those are part and parcel because
of course, it's the journey.
Yeah, in order to know, because otherwise you'd be going in a circle. Mm-hmm. So you have to know if you're moving laterally or unilaterally. Like and I think so. It's about merging the right and the left together in the discipline of the world. Because, you could easily just take LSD and disillusion yourself with the left brain. You could just get rid of it
completely.
But that's not you can't really function in life if you're on some psychedelic all the time. And I'm not here to knock that. That could open and expand ideas. But when you come back and the drug wears off, you still have to merge the left and the right brain together to have some functional adequacy through this world in happiness. Because, I don't know how happy you are when you're on LSD. Mm-hmm. You might experience things you've never experienced to open up your viewpoint, moving here forward. But it's not necessary. It really isn't. Yeah. But the steadfast principles in this world seem to have some real weight because every person we talk about that I've listened to that had some spiritual outlet, we're all talking about these disciplines in one way or another. Mm-hmm. And when you follow them, there seems to be something there.
Well, and at the crux of every single spiritual teacher, motivational speaker, you name it, is faith. it's knowing, it's direction, it's, against all odds, I still won't give up. I still believe. It's that steadfast that you're talking about. And that is all of what Neville's about, which is, I don't care what the outside world looks like. Here's my vision, and I'm going to move towards that.
Yeah.
And it's remaining completely steadfast.
Yeah, so what is his main teaching?
Yeah. Well,
it's imagination. Yeah.
Yep.
So he looks at imagination as the Christ mind within, or the God within. And, we know this, and that's getting back to the whole deal with giving mixed messages about imagination. Mm-hmm. But everything that we're experiencing right now, everything from the laptop and the camera and these microphones, didn't always exist.
No.
But prior to the existing, somebody imagined it and pulled it into fruition because they were steadfast in their imagination. Mm-hmm. And one of the principles like he uses, and I use it a lot, a good time to do it is at night. Like, imagine yourself the person you want to be from the state in which you are already there. Not of it, but in it. Mm-hmm. Of it means like, one day I'll be there. Like, look at yourself from a distance. Like, if you're looking at yourself in a car and you could see yourself through the car window and you're just an observer, that's thinking of it. But thinking from it is, if you're in the car, all you see is your knuckles on the steering wheel. Mm-hmm. You're looking out the windshield. You're looking out the side window. As you're looking around the car, you're actually in the car. So when you think from that place and then fall into a slumber at night and fall asleep, what happens is it starts to generate a frequency for you to actually start to act it out the days to follow. You'll start becoming that person. It's a little bit more than fake it till you make it. Mm-hmm. But you immerse yourself in it, and then you start acting it. So putting the imagination first will then produce the actions that will take for you to get there. A lot of people will teach you, do this action, and then one day you'll get there. And I'm like, you can get one day, but matter over matter is a very difficult way to live this life. It's very arduous. It's very, it's just tiring, and that's why a lot of people give up. But when you place yourself in the state of already assuming the thing you wanted, you assume
state fulfilled, if you will.
Yeah. When you assume the state fulfilled of already being that in which you wanted, over time you start acting as if you have it already, and through that action, all of a sudden the situation, circumstance, all of a sudden they start to appear. You didn't see them before, and now you see them. Mm-hmm. So it is this discipline, but it's a light discipline. It's not a rigorous one. It's like, I have to get up and do this. I'm like, no. If you want to get up early in the morning and do something, get into a state what it would feel like. Like, do you want to be a martyr? I'm like, that's a hell of a life to live. Or do you want to be someone that wakes up because they love to wake up early and go to the gym and run a multi-million-dollar business? Like, are you doing it because you want to, like, hey, look at me? Or, hey, this is cool. Mm-hmm. Like, what's the feeling you want? So get into that state of already having it. And then watch what happens. All of a sudden, you're going to find yourself getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, going to the gym, doing something, right? Because it's exciting. And people are like, oh, you're full of shit. I'm like, well, what happened? Remember you were a child and it was summer break or weekend? Did you lay in bed all day? No, you jumped up. You couldn't wait to get out there. This is a childlike state in which we're talking about. When you listen to Neville Goddard and study him, he'll bring you back to that childlike state very simplistically. It's not difficult, but you have to let go of the other side. So you have to become doubting Thomas, if you will, and then become Judas to slay off the old concept of who you were and no longer want to be, the one that was dividing you. So the division between the two of Christ and the crucifixion and then Christ of the resurrection. Which one do you want to be? If you want to, resurrect, you have to let go of the crucifixion.
I like how you brought up, how that old saying, everything that is was once imagined. That is the crux of Neville Goddard. That's what he's talking about here. And just like you also mentioned, the whole fake it till you make it type of thing. Fake it till you make it doesn't quote unquote work or whatever only because if you are something, you're not faking it. And so faking till you make it, it's like an outsider's perspective of what somebody's doing. But when you're doing these concepts or doing this work, in your imagination, just because something has not yet, manifested. Is that experience does not mean it's not to come or in process, etc. And that's what Neville is all about. I don't care what you can see in this moment right now. Our vision, our span of the light we can see, very small, minimal amount of light. The human light, spectrum is small. What we can hear, we all know this. Dogs can hear sounds that we can't hear at all. But is it real? If we can't hear it, and that's what everything around us right now. We can't see these electromagnetic waves all around us. These electrons, this ether, everything
but we can
around
feel
us.
them.
But we can feel it. And that's where we know.
The imagination begins. So
Exactly.
we feel the electromagnetic field. We feel these waves. We can then bring them into fruition, into the physical manifestation of the world.
And how do we do that? Through total faith. Through total
imagination.
Knowing. Yep. Through the imagination.
And that's imagination. So that's why we have to grasp our own imagination into that. And I believe that every human being came here with certain type of fulfillment, frequency, if you will. But a lot of times we're looking towards other people to see what they're doing, and okay, I want to do that person. Why? Because they look happy, they look successful. And I'm like, but if it doesn't jive with you, why would you do that? Because you're actually placing the outward world first, rather than the inner world, the imagination first. So yeah, you can, like an actor will act out a role in order to get fulfilled, immerse themselves in it. But if they don't use the idea of imagination, go in before physically acting out, they'll never get there. Yeah. So that's where the fake it till you make it. If you do it enough times, you'll start to feel it, immerse in it. But you have to start with, okay, how would it feel to act this out? And you think about it. Now you go up and act it out. It's like, okay, that didn't work. Let me go back again. So everything does come from the imagination, whether you think it or not. Mm-hmm. But what are you imagining? Are you imagining I can't do it? I can't have that?
Well, that's
because it doesn't. It works both ways. It's not.
That's where most of us are stuck. Yeah. We're saying, I tried, I couldn't do it. Well, you've imagined you couldn't do it, and now you're in this state. You're experiencing you haven't done this. It's like, what side do you want to be on?
Yeah,
because it's working no matter what.
So either way, you're doubting.
Yep.
So you're in. You
can doubt that it's working, or you can doubt that it's not working.
Yeah.
What do you want to choose?
Yeah.
And that's something I remind myself often.
Yeah.
Which is, hey, what direction do I want to go towards?
Yeah.
Is this one of, okay, I guess this probably isn't going to work, or I guess this, or I know this is going to work. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And the struggle, like we talk about, the struggle in life is about, it's when we get really honed in and focused, there's no struggle, but there's so much going on that it creates the struggle, but that struggle creates more of a refinement of discipline. So we then like the struggle. I like to grind because in the process we call grinding or struggle, I actually become more disciplined in the refinement of my focus. Because, up to a certain point of age, like walking on a sidewalk became very simple and easy. And then, okay, if I wanted to get more focus, I had to find like a balance beam and thereon and so forth. It's the difficulty that created the refinement. So that onto itself is part of the discipline. You can't, and that's what it is. What do I need to focus? I need to be completely steadfast. And sometimes be steadfast, I need so much loud noise coming at me that I completely learn how to shut it out. Because if I'm in a quiet room and I'm just trying to focus on breathing, there's not a great discipline there. Me lighting a candle in the morning or just sitting on my couch and meditating is not a great discipline. My discipline is like when you go to the mall, like on Christmas Eve. That's a great discipline.
Why the hell are you at the mall on Christmas Eve, Frank?
I said, I'm Scrooge, right? But it's a discipline because you have to sit there. For one, it was a tradition I started years ago, and it came out of practical, setting, because there was a point where my life was so flipping hectic because of my mind. Not really because of what was going on. I'm doing way more than I was back then, but it was hectic. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I had no one help me. Like I was a single dad. My son was like 3 years old, and I'm running a business, and, I'm either working or have my son. And so like I would always go shopping on Christmas Eve because my son would be with his mom on Christmas Eve, and I'd get on Christmas Day. So I have one day a year to go shopping.
That's what we tell ourselves.
That's what I created.
Exactly,
that. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I created that. And so you get to the point where it's like you had to accept whatever was left on the shelf.
Yeah, seriously, right?
And then you had to deal with the parking and everything else, and over time. But then it was defeating to me. But now I do it as a form of discipline and fun, because I go into it. It's like, yeah, I'm like, I really don't need anything. I become indifferent, but not. So people, like, a lot of times when I say the word indifferent, they think empathetic or apathetic. I don't mean to be apathetic. I'm indifferent. I love it, but whatever the outcome is, it doesn't bother me. But I love the game. I love going there and watching people run around and move in and out like you're the game maker of Matrix.
Yeah, right.
And all of a sudden, that's when the special gift for me shows up for somebody that I wasn't thinking about. Everyone, like, I'm thinking about, I gotta get this, I gotta get that. On Christmas Eve, I go to the store. I get the best gift I ever got somebody because it just came to me.
Yeah.
So, again, I'm not saying everyone has to do that practice, but that's my practice. But it came out of a place of misery. And when I changed my concept of myself, completely changed it, like the Judas in me, and I slayed that and betrayed it and came anew. I still went out on Christmas Eve and still shop, but it's a completely different experience. It's amazing because a lot of people are like, how do you do, like you just said, how do you do it? I'm like, well, I have a different mindset about it. And so, yeah, people are like, why just not do it? I'm like, well, it's like learning how to swim but never swimming.
Yeah.
Like, why would you take, like, learning how to wield a sword without even wielding the sword? It's a discipline I've been working on. I'm fucking not going to get rid of it.
Long time.
I'm not going to get rid of this. And I got to keep that. So I have to go in and make sure I'm really not getting frustrated. I got to really make sure that, I can control myself. So the way to do that is to get into the war, so to speak. And that's the brilliance of it. So all these disciplines arm us with heading into this world, because it is difficult if you don't have the disciplines in your toolkit. And but someone like Neville Goddard shows you these disciplines are a lot easier than you think if you understand them. If you misunderstand them, they actually work against each other. And
contradict one another.
We were very contradicting in the way we were taught things, and that's why we're all dizzy. That's why it was luck or bad luck. It could go this way or that way. I'm like, well, if you head west, you can only get to west. You can hit every place on the planet, so to speak, because we live on a round planet.
Keep going.
But westward is always the direction which you go. So when you choose that, and it's not better than east, but if you're going east, west, all of a sudden, the feeling of not getting anywhere arises, and you realize something's wrong here. I'm like, you're contradicting yourself. If you're trying to get somewhere, you got to go in a direction and move. Discipline yourself. Place yourself on that target.
See, that's awesome.
That focus, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Neville's background. Born in Barbados, came to New York City.
Yeah.
What did he start doing? He was like a Broadway dancer. He was a dancer, but he did Broadway.
Arts, yeah.
He was also in the military or the army or whatever.
He was like 38 years old. So he got pulled in. He got drafted in.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was 30 years old. Already had a family. And then he did his wish fulfilled thing. Yeah,
where he got sent home.
I
love that. Yeah. That's one of my favorites, Well, I can't remember. I don't want to butcher it too bad, but I remember he was, in the military. He wanted to go home. He wanted to see his wife, right?
Yeah.
His wife and his kids.
Yep.
So he wanted to go home. And so each day, he'd go back to his bunk or whatever, and he would vividly picture being at home, spending that moment with his children, seeing his wife, etc., and what that felt like. And I forgot what it was, but I think he went to his officer, like his commanding officer, and was like, "Hey, I'd like to go home." And the guy was like, "No."
It's not happening.
Wait, what? You know?
It's kind of like when I go to Karen and say, "Yeah, no."
Yeah. And so he goes to see his commanding officer, and he's like, "I'd like to leave." And the guy simply says, "No, not possible. You've got this left to serve. Blah blah blah. This is how it's going to work." And then Neville, doesn't get upset about the situation. Okay, absolutely. Goes back, continues this steadfast faith. of picturing himself back in, was it New York City?
New York City, his apartment, yeah.
Exactly. Back in New York City, etc., with his wife, etc. Did not give up on this. I can't remember how many times he spoke with his commanding officer, went back to him, but roughly a few months later, whatnot, right before he had needed to go home, he gets called in, by that commanding officer, and I forgot how it happened, but essentially it's like, you're not going to believe this now.
Well, yeah, the guy didn't want to do it, but he went against his own advice and gave him an honorable discharge.
Yeah,
and let him go home. Yeah.
Yep, and sent Neville home. Did Neville fight him? No. Did he piss moan? No, none of that. It was simply through imagination that he was able to construct this mental reality. Because at the end of the day, guys, I know we're taught that this world feels very real. But the more advanced our sciences get and the more we learn about what this experience is, there is nothing real about what this experience is.
But the experience itself is real.
Of course.
So that's why, it's easier. Whenever I get people's attention on this whole idea of imagination, it's easier to come from the negative part. Because when something good happens to people, they'll say, well, I had to work really hard for that, or it was by luck, or it might not happen again. But when I come from negative, I can prove this, because I can prove this. You can prove this principle in both directions, because it's physics. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have any judgment onto how you use these disciplines.
Yep.
All right. So if you're pissed off at your boss, and you're just mulling over in your head what you're going to go in and say to your boss, and then you're worried about getting fired and all this stuff, so you better not say it. Also, if you keep on that circumstance or situation is going to come into fruition.
100%.
And then you're going to know, you tell yourself, I knew it. I knew it. Well, yeah, because you wrote the script. If like a director says, I knew it, I'm like, yeah, the director directs, but the writer wrote the script.
We're not conscious of that. Yeah,
we're not aware of it.
It's all unconscious.
But you create
just thinking it, not any idea that, oh, wow, what I'm replaying every single day, I'm bringing to fruition.
Yeah, and you're making it bigger and bigger and bigger to the point where, yeah, everyone will see it. And again, like you mentioned, the grievances, the justified grievances, and everyone will agree with it. But how did that work out for you? But you didn't realize you were playing that in your head. Or you could have doubted that one and went for the one that would said, okay, right now things aren't good between me and my boss, but I'm going to look at my boss differently, and I'm going to pitch my boss coming in and says, you know what, your work's getting better and things are good, and I kind of like you. I never really noticed what you were doing, but I'm starting to notice. If you play that over in your head, something like that will happen. It might not happen exactly, just like everyone that writes a screenplay. They deviate from it slightly, but not so too much where the story changes, and they're okay with that, because it's all about. That's the format, but it might not happen exactly that way, but it happens in the direction in which the story wants to be told. Mm-hmm. So if you start doing that, watch what happens. It's a discipline. Even though it's not what is, it's a discipline to get you to what you want to experience. And that's where the great discipline works.
And I do this all the time. You can do this with your family, with your loved ones. I do this with my brother. I do this with, my parents. Picture the state in which you would like to see them, and picture moments of that. If you want to see your mother, your father healthy, okay, then why are you picturing them sick, dying? Why are you picturing their funeral? Why are you picturing their pain, the suffering of that moment? It's so much easier for us to picture that, because that's how we've kind of been wired in Western culture. It's a lot of pain, suffering. But you can easily picture your mother, your father, healthy, strong, at home, doing everything that they would love to do, which feels better? Which is going to move you into the direction you want to be? Well, clearly that of, your parents healthy, happy, successful. But we don't often choose that mentally. And so we're running these unconscious stories day in, day out, and we don't even realize, oh my God, I'm inviting, this horrendous experience, or this experience that I do not prefer. And so when you can become aware of the thoughts and the narrative that you're running in your head, because at the end of the day, all we are as humans are just storytellers. That's what we are. We run a narrative. We experience this narrative knowingly or unknowingly, and then we branch off from that. Oh, this happened because of this, and we write a story about why things happen. When you can flip that entire script, you see that you're writing the story as it's happening. In fact, the way light reflects off our eyes, as soon as I see something, it's never actually me seeing something for the first time. This is, there's like a delay, if you will, about each experience. So we're actually kind of living in the past as we're experiencing life. As we're going through the motions and stuff, it's not happening now. It's a delayed reaction from where our imagination was.
Yeah, and the question I always ask, I ask this of myself too. How is this working for you? And if it's not working for me, I then have to alter my imagination, and I have to, move beyond that point. I have to put that to death, if you will, suicide.
Yep.
Of that old concept. Oh,
there we go.
My mic went out. Yeah. So as I start to get these principles down better, all of a sudden, I always ask myself, how is this working for me? Well, a lot of people, they're like, well, it's not working for me, but this is how it is. I'm like, okay, but if I can give you another alternative and it's working out for you, would you try it? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, just try it. And then when you study from a physics standpoint, and like quantum physics, it works either way. Whether I go this way, I go into the gutter or into heaven, so to speak, the physics works the same. It's the discipline in which I focused on and what the outcome I wanted based on how I feel. So my imagination perceives me, not the outside world. The outside world is just telling me what's already here. And then guess what? The outside world, I can look at it, I can perceive it any way I want to get a different reaction back. But if the outside world is too overwhelming for me to do that, close your eyes. Go into the deep. Go into that dark imagination and pull out what do you want to do that. And do it every day, a little every day. And watch all areas of your life start to unfold brilliantly. And then like, oh my God, there's something about this. Yes, they actually collapse brilliantly because of your imagination as well. Because we were told this and that, or this or that is going to get you. And like this and that exists, but which one do you want? Because you can't do both at the same time. You can't be in heaven and in hell at the same time.
And that's the as you dive deeper into these concepts, you start to see there's infinite possibilities playing out right now. You in any way you could possibly imagine yourself. That's actually happening. Yeah. We're multidimensional human beings. And then where the continuity of the story, where we carry it consciously, is how things unfold and begin to happen, etc. This is where we get like the Mandela effect and all sorts of stuff. It's there are multiple timelines, and it's like, okay, which timeline do I imagine myself? Which timeline do I want to experience? And I choose you. I choose this, and it's making that steadfast decision to move forward into that. Unknowingly, the majority of us are at home imagining ourselves into suffering, into pain, into constant, letdown, rejection, etc., because we say this always happens to me. Of course, this is always, I'm not good enough. This is why, my parents did this to me growing up. My partner, did this to me because of this. We create these narratives and we justify them, and we say this is why this happened. Well, you can, as easily as you created that story, you can drop that and move on and move in the direction in which you want to experience. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, when you get to that point, usually a lot of people get to that point where their life is so dismal and like, why is this happening? Well, again, understand the disciplines and trying to get somewhere in life. It's moving in a single direction that creates a fulfillment of life. Not necessarily what you're doing at the time, but how you're feeling about it at the time. Why, when you tell the story, the narrative, life sucks, is because you're literally moving in a circle and you keep chasing your tail.
Unconscious.
So you're unconscious. So that's what's going on. But we actually like, I tell people, like, what do you have to lose? Just try this thing. Like, I have a client I'm working with and keeps, in his business, keeps having these issues, right? And I'm like, well, just try this one thing. And he has like 20 things he's trying to do. I'm like, stop. Just do one of those, all right? Mm-hmm. And he wanted to go up and knock on people's door. I'm like, understand the world you're living in. I'm like, why don't you walk down the block, or walk down, walk in the neighborhood. It doesn't even have to be yours. And whomever's outside, why don't you just say hi to them, start talking to them, and do not present your business to them. Don't present anything to them. Just be friendly. You got to practice to do that first. These simple things. It's the overwhelmment of trying to run the marathon the first day you decide to run the marathon. I'm like, run to the end of your block and come back. That's a discipline. It's a discipline to take it slow. So if I want to run a marathon, I'm like, okay, let me run to the end of the block. Maybe do it for a couple of days, and then after a couple of days, I run to the second block. And then all of a sudden, like, okay, I can do this. Now I'm running a mile. And then, like, wow, now I'm running another mile. The discipline. But if you could just muster up the ability to run a marathon in one day, you're not going to do it the next day. And all of a sudden, the discipline's gone. And you think, oh, that one time I had enough energy to run the marathon, and I somehow made it. Well, now you're not done. There's no fulfillment there. The fulfillment isn't running the marathon, by the way. The fulfillment is the movement towards the fact that, my God, look at me. I'm running a marathon.
The journey.
It's a journey. That's it. But it's a steadfast journey in a direction in which you focus. You're looking out the windshield of your vehicle.
Not at the rear view.
No. Because that will distract you, and that's when life gets difficult. If you're looking at the rear view mirror, your vehicle, you're moving very slow. Try doing 100 miles an hour and looking at the rear view mirror. Like, you're not going to do it for long. Good luck.
Yeah.
You can do it, but you can't do it for long because you'll put yourself and others in harm. So when you're moving, just keep going. Yeah, there's a pothole, detour. So what? You get off. You move it. You're still looking forward. Even though there's a pothole, you still have to get off to the side. You're still looking forward.
See, the majority of us get lost because we hit that first pothole and we say, why does this
down.
Pothole exist?
Well, if you hit it breaks everything down.
What's the size of this pothole? What was my contribution? We get so wrapped up in the details.
Why
of
is this here?
Yep. Rather than just moving past it and through it.
Yeah, I talk about this too with the understanding of studying history. And there's nothing wrong with it, right? But I don't necessarily study history. I do it for a little bit to get into conversation with people. But unless studying history just excites you. But what I've realized, the more we study history, the more we realize we know very little to make any claims that this is how it is. But if you're studying the history of a steadfast movement into this enjoyment of life and exploration, it's brilliant because it's never going to end, by the way. Because history is moving. You don't realize it's moving in both directions. Like these anthropologists now are finding out that civilizations are living longer. They're not living shorter. You know what I'm saying? Like, when I say living shorter, I mean, okay, they would first believe that we were around for 10,000 years, and that number keeps growing. And the planet, the Big Bang was like years ago. It was like I forget how many, like 13 billion. Now it's like 14 billion years, and soon it's going to be 15 billion years, so to speak, because and that's why a lot of people come to common understanding that it always existed, always will exist. There was never a Big Bang.
And that's where science, by the way, is at. They're starting to,
play
with that idea that
that's where
there was no Big Bang.
That's where some people are and some people aren't. I don't know enough to even invite myself into. I'm just using it as an example, so I'm not here to discredit or credit anybody because I'm not a scientist. But I do like the scientific understanding of how I move in my world. But I'm not really trying to discover anything. I'm trying to create a state in which I want to continue on. And through that, I notice everything around me starts to work out. The friendships, the people I'm with, you start to see this cooperativeness, cooperative aspect of life, and everyone seems to be around me. And even when someone runs into trouble, it's easy to create a detour for them to go there, or even for me, because now I got so much support. So if something happens, I know who to call. This will happen, but now instead of like, oh, poor me, and go down and lock myself in the house, I'm like, no, this is all right. There's a detour here. How do I figure this out? Oh, that person I ran into, okay, they'll help me out. How do I get out? And then they tell me, I'm like, okay, it's no big deal. So the more expansive we become in this discipline, the easier life becomes. It really does, because of momentum is what we have on our side. Yeah, you could slow down, but I'm still moving in the direction in which I want. Even though there's traffic, my car is still pointing in the direction in which I want to go. That's okay with me. But when you're going around the freaking circle, you feel the G-force of it. You know it's aggravating because you're really not getting anywhere. You're seeing the same settings over and over and over, like on a merry-go-round.
Yeah, and wondering why it's not working.
It's like living on a merry-go-round opposed to a train that's running across the country, so to speak. It's a lot.
I know that feeling well. I lived the first 8 years of my life that way.
I get
constant, just
yeah. I still get caught up in every once in a while, but now when I realize, it's like when I it's almost like you see these, like when people go out to, like, if they get lost in the woods, they don't have a compass, they'll start dropping stuff along the way, and the reason they do that is because they come upon it, they realize they circled back. Mm-hmm. It's not like they're trying to get back because they don't know where they're going. So when you start to drop stuff and you start circling back, you're like, shit, I'm circling back. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I find myself circling back, but that makes me up to go forward. Back and then I become a little more focused and disciplined because I got distracted. That's why I circled back. And so you learn a lesson now. When I circle back, I have to dig deeper and become more proficient in my discipline, which in the end, I'm like, oh, thank God I circled back because it got me, it made me excel. And that's the story I tell myself because it's more of a positive one, right? Mm-hmm. Someone says, well, you would have been there quicker. I'm like, perhaps, but we'll never know.
That's it.
Yeah.
Who controls the narrative?
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's jump into our first clip.
All right, here you go. Here's Neville Goddard.
You'll take it from Scripture, but something first, I think, with which you're all familiar. If you took a piece of steel that's magnetized, it does not differ in substance from the demagnetized piece of steel, only in its arrangement of its molecules. The rich man, the poor man, the beggar man, the thief are not different minds, but simply different arrangements of the same mind. There is only God in this world. So when you say I am, and I say I am, it's the same God, but we have arranged the structure of our mind differently. We have different concepts of self, and that's all. But not one is better because he is richer than the one who is poor. These are only different arrangements of the structure of the mind. Now, Scripture tells us, and I'm quoting now the book of James, the Epistle of James. James is really a letter of Jacob. The word James and Jacob are identical in Hebrew, Greek, and in the Arabic tongue. The same word. So when they begin, James, a servant of God and the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, you can see at once it's simply a Christian revision of this Jewish letter. It's the letter of Jacob. And if you read it carefully, only twice do they insert, say, Jesus Christ our Lord. All the others, there are 11 other times, it is simply God. The Lord is God, not Christ. So here it is really the servant of the Lord speaking. And he's giving us some fantastic instruction and very practical instruction. Now listen to it carefully. I'm now going to quote from the very first chapter of the book of James. Be doers of the word, and not hearers only. For he who is a hearer and not a doer is like a man who observes his natural face in a mirror, then goes his way and at once forgets what he is like. But he who looks into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, he will be blessed in his doing.
I like how he uses the magnetism.
Absolutely.
Because it is. It's like, like he said, the beggar, the rich man, or I forgot how he stated it, but it's one isn't better. It's just a different arrangement of the same mind.
And that's what we can be. We have the ability to be all of those based on where our thoughts are at.
Yeah.
Are we the beggar? Are we, that CEO? Are we this? We're that? We put ourselves in our roles. And, we don't realize this, but growing up, you're told you're not good enough, or you be great at this. You should do this, you're tall. You should play basketball. We're told all this shit growing up. And we allow ourselves to internalize it and take it for fact. Well, somebody outside of me, somebody I respect, told me this. It must be true. I look up to my parents, or I look up to my teachers. I look up to, my friends, all this, and we internalize it. And then we say, this is who I am. And then we move out and we play that role. Oh, I can't act this way. I'm an introvert, or I'm shy. What the fuck does that mean? These are all things we've been told or interpret, and we put ourselves in these boxes. And then we're like, oh, I can't do that. That's not me.
Yeah.
Well, what's you? Who's you? You define you. And so, hearing this, rearrange your mind to manifest anything you want. All it takes is, okay, what do I want to experience? Okay, let's imagine that. And then from there, as things come up, I remain steadfast. I don't stray towards the goal. You're going to have to maneuver through a lot of different stuff, and challenges will come up that will challenge you, your beliefs, hey, you've felt this way for so long. We're going to show you some more of this, you got to break through that, knowing, hey, I'm going to betray you, old mind. I'm going to let go of you, old mind, ego mind. I'm going to move towards the goal I want. And I thought that was cool. One of the other sayings that I wrote down during that I thought was great was, he said, what did he write? Be doers of the word, not hearers. And I thought that was powerful.
Well, the great analogy that came off of this for me was the electromagnetic field. So if you take an iron bar, and the molecules they're scattered. So they're in the arrangement, they're not steadfast in a direction. They're not in one direction. They're scattered all over the place. And that's the contradiction that I talked about. So in a contradicted world, the bars are scattered, so nothing is magnetized to it. Nothing will attract to it. So the beggar has nothing attracting in the way of fulfillment. But the steadfast mind actually has all the molecules heading in one direction, which creates magnetism. And when you create magnetism, life is easier. Things attract to you. You're not chasing it. So it's about becoming magnetized in a mind and being steadfast and arranging everything in one direction. If the molecules all arrange in one direction, the magnetism is strong. But if they're disarranged, unarranged, or however you want to word it, they're scattered, all of a sudden you can't attract anything. And this is why people that, even though they're good people, they're not attracting into the world because
they don't believe it.
They don't have a discipline in an arrangement, in a movement, in a direction. What they have is contradiction, which is a scattered piece of iron, which can't be magnetized. And once you arrange the molecules in the same direction, all of a sudden the magnetism comes in. So this is the discipline. But the iron
crux of law of attraction, law of assumption, all of this.
But to the iron bar, whether it's magnetized or not, it's not better or worse. But from the world, if you want to attract things to you, you better become a magnet, and that's a steadfast focus in which we do.
And again, like you said, this is physics. This isn't philosophy.
Yeah, this is even part of classic physics to extent. We knew about this even magnetism and stuff like that before, how to arrange molecules, right? Even though it's at the quantum level of understanding it, but yet there's something physically actually happen when you do that. Mm-hmm. So you could see it in the physical world. You take two iron, you take iron files, and they're pretty much scattered everywhere, because if they weren't, they would connect to each other. Mm-hmm. And they're in, say, sand, and I take a magnet, I can draw those into me. So you can draw all the people, kind of like how Christ drew into him in a metaphoric way, but people look at physically, the 12 disciples, the 12 dispensations of the mind, the 12 qualities of the mental image of mind. And when we have to put disciplines to them, all of a sudden we become magnetized, because you have all those 12 disciplines in the mind moving in a direction that actually fulfills. Mm-hmm. And that's the brilliance of it. It's like, okay, But the way I was taught, they were working against each other.
Yep.
They were fighting, and you got to watch out for the Judas guy because he's going to take Jesus out, and Thomas over here keeps doubting, and Peter denied, and all these things. I'm like, wow. I'm like, how is this to work? But either I completely misunderstood understood how I was being taught, or I was being taught contradiction. And throughout my life, talking to people about that, I'm like, yeah, I think it was this contradiction. Maybe the people teaching didn't understand it either. I don't know.
Well, that's where,
the good comes with the bad. I'm like, what does that mean? Why, it's all good on the seventh day in Genesis.
Well, I mean, every day we're taught by people who don't know themselves, whether that's our parents, whether that's teachers, whether that's, our politicians, our president. We're constantly being told, this is how it is, and this was what must be done. When we full and well know, number one, maybe they've never experienced that. Number two, they don't know. They've never lived it. There's all sorts of things, and we just blindly believe that.
Well, the truth is, this is how it is.
Which way do we want to blindly believe is what I'm getting.
But I think that's why they gain a lot of popularity, because this is how it is. You can't deny it. But is this the way you want it to be? Mm-hmm. I had a discussion about somebody about history, and they talk about, well, history is just based on war, so we'll always have war. And I'm like, you believe that to be true? He's like, yeah. I'm like, so do you ever think that there'll be peace? Like, I've never seen peace. Well, why does peace exist? It's because the lack of steadfast. Because there are people that live on this planet that were aware of war but never been in a war. All right, they remain in peace when they stay focused. So, not all bars of iron are going to be magnetized, but they have the ability to be, because they have the same qualities. Mm-hmm. But until you get the molecules moving in the same direction, you can't have it. But this type of iron can still, it's not like, oh, this type of iron can't be magnetized. No, it can be. It may not be now, but it can be. Everyone knows how to do it. You take a coil of wire, copper wire, wrap it around, you put a positive, negative in it. It's all of a sudden starts to rearrange the molecules moving in one direction. You have a magnet. Mm-hmm. So every human being can be magnetized. We're not different. We have the same mind. But unless you create these disciplines, and they're easy, they're simple, take them, take it one day at a time. Just imagine yourself above the place in which you're in, day in and day out, and stop having insistence and waking up in the morning. It's like, it's not here yet. It's not here yet. I'm like, it's like the fulfillment is the imagination. And then all of a sudden, one day you walk out into the world, you realize, I am that person. I'm walking taller. I'm saying hi to people. These are simple things. Like a lot of the client I was talking about, I'm like, he's trying to walk up to people and push his business. Do you ever just say hi to somebody that you don't know? Mm-hmm. Just say hi. Hey, how's it going? Don't try to, because when you try to push your business, he knows I'm trying to push something. That feels bad for you. You're actually pushing that person away. It's just weird. 100%. Just say hi. And if you say hi to someone enough times, you run into them like after the fifth or sixth time, they go, hey, by the way, what do you do? I'm like, oh, it just so happens I do this. Really? I like you. I'm going to use your business. Yeah. But if you're just trying to sell your business, and if you're trying to do that, there's a desperation on your side. Mm-hmm. If there's a desperation inside, all of a sudden you're not magnetized. If you're not magnetized, I can tell you it's not going to work. Mm-hmm. It's not going to work. But if you just go out there and start talking to people, hey, how's it going? Like, really care about people and do this. You align yourself. You start moving these molecules in a direction. And one day, all of a sudden, your business comes to you. You don't go to it. Mm-hmm. It's a simple formula. But we weren't taught this. We were taught you have to do this way, that way. You have to knock on 5 doors and force your way in the door. And you got to sell that car to that person if you want to make it. If you don't want to get fired, you got to sell that car to that person. Mm-hmm. Like, holy shit, how can anyone work in that facet?
Painful, draining.
You have to be like a sociopath, right? Mm-hmm. And,
But that's the world the majority of us dwell in.
I knew I would never survive in that world. So there was a point in my life where I'm like, I'm just fine working here, But I'm like, no. And I started changing my disciplines, started changing, and I never chased anything. I sit there and I do it. Action is always on my side, but just like a magnet likes to move, it starts to pull things to it. So in the physical world, Like if you're out in space and there's two objects moving towards each other, it's very difficult to understand which one's actually moving. Who cares at this point? Because if it's effortless, I don't care if it's me moving or it's moving towards me. It doesn't matter. But when you become more magnetized, you actually are drawing. And hey, if you're pulling up against a strong magnet as well, oh, more the better. That's what a great relationship is.
That's it.
I want that person to be magnetized just as much as I am. And guess what? When those iron files hit that magnet, they start to become magnetized. So they start to turn into magnets as well. So that's what we do. If I magnetize myself, I start magnetizing everybody around me. And so I have to hold myself to be a magnet in order to change the world in which I think needs to be changed.
I love that.
Yeah. So become the magnet.
Let's jump into our next clip.
All right.
For we are the operant power. It doesn't work itself. I can tell you that your imagination is Christ. And maybe you'll believe me. But unless you actually take it to the point of working upon it and operating it, it means nothing. Well, if this night I really believe it, I would not allow the sun to go down in my sleep unless I feel myself right into the situation of the wish fulfilled. It need not a wish for myself. It could be a wish for a friend, for everyone in my world, because Christ dwells in all, and Christ is the true identity of every man. Then everyone must be myself pushed out. It can't be another if God is one. Therefore I tell myself, as the seeming other, what I would do were I you. And instead of giving him the thing that he needs physically, tell him how to get it for himself. What would you feel like if now you were the man that you want to be? How would you see the world if things were as you desire them to be? Now this is what I mean by living in the end. Robert Frost, just the year before he departed this sphere, he wrote this story for Life magazine. And he said the founding fathers did not believe in the future. What a shock that they did not believe in the future. They believed it in. He said we are always imagining ahead of our evidence. And the most creative thing in man is to believe a thing in. They had no evidence to support their claim to democracy. They were under a king when they threw the king away and began to simply build a concept of the future. They did not believe that the mere passage of time would bring them that dream. They believed it in. And these men believed implicitly in the Word of God. And they believed that if I know what I want, when I pray, believe that I have received it, and I will. Well, if that precept is true, literally true, to be accepted literally and fulfilled literally, well, then what am I doing not believing? I should actually know exactly what I would like to be, and discovering what I would like to be as against what I seem to be, dare to assume that I am it. And my assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. That I know from my own experience. And I know it's a law. Therefore, if someone is not becoming the man that they would like to be, and they tell me, but I once imagined it and it didn't work, then what are you doing now and still not imagining it? If imagining creates reality, what are you imagining? For if Christ is the only creative power in the universe, and I identify him with my own imagination, well, then my imagination is creating reality.
I like that. Perfect.
Me too. Great summary of just kind of everything that we've been going over.
Yeah, because part of what you said in the beginning too, which is another part that it eases the mind. When you move in that direction and you start to imagine being in that, not moving towards it, the work is done for you. Like you'll willingly take action on something because it'll seem fun and exciting, but you don't have to figure it out. That's the brilliance of magnetism. You don't have to figure it out, but if you're just a non-magnetized piece of metal, you have to keep moving and finding something. But when you're a magnet, things are drawn to you. The work is done for you. You're just now experiencing the work through the doing of life.
Yeah, that's the majority, or where we get held up is we don't know how it's going to play out. So because we can't imagine how it's going to play out, or this happens and then I accomplish. If we don't have that idea, we give up. And we say, well, I don't know how to start a business, I've never hired employees before. I've never done A, B, and C before. And then we give up. We have to set the goal And then we have to go out and move towards
And
the goal.
how do you set the goal?
You set the goal through your imagination.
That's it. You actually be. So it's
You
a business.
become the goal.
Yeah, if it's a business you want to start, you have to see yourself already maybe 10 years in the business, successful. You have to see yourself not moving towards it, but in it at this moment right now. So if I want to be a successful business in a specific business, I have to see myself being honored in that business.
Yep.
Like if you're a musician, see yourself getting inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not just like, walking into a studio and praying to God that, a good song comes out.
No,
but
absolutely.
that's how we were taught. We were trying to picture how to do something. No one knows how to do anything because everything it was once imagined.
Correct.
So and that's where if you reverse engineer something and try to replicate it, you're still going to get a different output in what the first mold was.
Well, there's infinite ways that something can be accomplished, and I didn't understand that before I began to learn these concepts. I thought, you had to do this, this, and this in order to get this. That's how we were always taught. Classic physics, in order to become successful, you need these items.
That's the reverse engineering process, by the way.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's probably why we do it,
Yeah.
Or we're taught
It
that.
only gets you back to where you started.
Yeah, it's the same thing about life.
Yeah.
We all think, okay, what's happiness? Happiness is, a good job, a good relationship, the house with the white picket fence, and, a little bit of extra money to go on vacation. Well, then we all go out and we get those, and we go, wait a second, why aren't I happy? I did this, and this. Why aren't I happy? Oh, shit, now it's time for a midlife crisis. Like, this is the most common thing out there, guys. And it's because, we're assuming that activities outside of us, external things, are going to bring us this happiness. Okay, I accomplished this, so it's going to lead towards this. Well, start at what you want it to lead towards. What are you trying to be? Be that. And then when you're that, different opportunities, people, places, things are going to unfold. And this is why people talk about how it's the journey that you're supposed to appreciate, or it's all about the journey, not so much the destination. Is you don't know how you set the destination. I'm going to be rich. I'm going to be the top. I'm going to be the president one day. Whatever, you can set your goal and you will achieve it.
But if you're going
how
to
you're
be
going to
it,
achieve it.
if you're going to be it, you'll never achieve it.
Well,
You
know
have
what I
to
mean?
be it.
That's it. And
Yeah.
at the end of it, it's not so much we're thinking about the A, B, and C to get to the D. We need to start at D, and we don't care how we get there. And
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
then life gets exciting and things start to open up, and we don't question anything. If something's happening, it's accepted exactly like it is, and say, hey, this is needed and necessary in order for me to get where I want to go. And that's what I started doing. And I see this, guys, in my personal business. I see this, in my relationships, family, romantic, etc. Where do you want to be? Be it. And then from there, just allow things to unfold. Allow the theater to play out, and you're going to be so blown away. And it's exciting because you're like, oh, my God, like, I never thought this would have happened. And that's what the whole enjoying the journey side of things, ultimately is all about.
Yeah, how I learned to really allow these concepts to really fall in, immerse themselves in me. It's like I play this game with my clients. I would tell I don't really use this analogy anymore, but I would say if you knew in 10 years you would have $50 million inserted into your bank account, how would you act now? Oh, I would not worry. That's how you have to act.
Absolutely.
All of a sudden, knowing that it's going to be there is the full faith and trust in that. Then you're going to act differently. But if you are saying, oh, it's going to be there, but you're acting differently now, you'll never make to the place where you see the insertion of the 50 million. And that's the truth. Like, there are some people that, like, well, okay, when my grandmother dies or whatever, I'm going to get this money. That's probably why they don't worry about it now. Now, that's, again, your grandmother may never die.
Yeah.
She might live to 90, 100 years old. But when you place yourself already having the thing in which you want, you start to generate that feeling. And then when it actually comes into fruition, why you don't fall off the bridge of, like, why isn't it exciting? Because you've been living the excitement in the period of what we call the
gestation period.
The gestation period. So you were so used to that feeling. When it came, you're like, wow, okay, this is working. But if you actually came up upon something, because it can happen that way, where you just get it, all of a sudden, okay, I got this promotion, but I don't feel good, is because you were waiting for the promotion to feel good. Where you, instead of feeling good the whole way, when the promotion came, you would have been in the field of feeling good. The promotion would have just been another notch up to show you, oh, obviously the feeling good is why I got the promotion. But because we see it differently, we think something else should happen, like balloons supposed to fall down and everything else. I'm like, no, it's just another day in life.
One thing I also loved about that clip was the way he talked about, the founding fathers of this country. They didn't hope for a land of the free, America, etc.
Well, they didn't look into the future of it.
Yeah, and that's what he was kind of talking about, which was so cool. They knew it, nothing was accomplished yet. Like you were saying, there was still a monarchy and all this stuff. We're still breaking away, but these gentlemen knew that we must believe it into being. And so, what did they do? We are freedom. We are this, and they believed it from day one. Yeah. And it was that allowed the series of events for everything else to unfold, and for us to build and create a U.S. Constitution and all sorts of things, and it began to fall into place. But it started with belief. Yeah,
and what's interesting too is because one could say the book was written on the day in which the end, or when the imagination came, before any pen ever hit the paper, and that's how life is. And now, even looking at the world that was built by the founding fathers, anyone can have a different perception on whether it's good or bad. And I warn those people. I'm like, well, you can have it either way, but not both. Or if you have it both ways, you're going to have a headache by the end of the day. Why wouldn't you choose a preferential one? Because I can make up stories. I could easily make up stories of the horrificness of what happened in this country, or the brilliance that happened in this country. Because nothing is ever perfect. Why? Because it's continuously growing and expanding. Perfection is an idea that it's done. Well, my life is not going to ever be done. So I don't look for perfection, but that is the perfection, is I keep building upon. I was like, oh, this is good. Oh, I could be a little more steadfast in this area. That is the perfection, is the non-perfection. So how we perceive it, that's up to us. You can choose to look at it poorly, or you can choose to look at it good, but that's your imagination. And when you hold your imagination steadfast of looking at it in the direction in which you want to go, that's magnetism. Otherwise, you're breaking apart the magnetism, and life gets difficult. It's not difficult because the outside world, it's difficult because your perception to it. And when you actually go along with it and change the story, your magnetism grows, and all of a sudden things start to move in your direction. I don't care what color you are, what gender you are, what pronoun you are. It doesn't matter. It's how you perceive it. If you want a difficult life, you can make one. I hear even with all this stuff going on, and all these different, from women to, different cultures and genders and all these things, and, black people talking about what happened. And we all know the history of that. Now all of a sudden I hear white men start oh, life is difficult for me. And I'm like, really? You're going to make that story? Is that the story you're going to tell? I'm like, why don't we all get beyond that and say we learn lessons of fragmentation, if that's even a word. Mm-hmm. But when you actually are contradicting everything that we think, you break apart, and we were separate, and we thought we were better than them, and they thought they were better than us, and all this stuff. And we realized, whoa, we're all of the same mind. And if we all join together like particles and move in the same direction, we'll all be magnetized together. Why would you choose life is difficult for me now because things have turned? I'm like, that's your perception. It isn't real reality. Until you perceive it that way, you'll experience reality. So I'm not taking it away from you, but why would you choose that? Why would you choose that, knowing what we know now? Well,
so this concept and stuff, this really, because I've been following Neville for years now, and it's hard when you're first learning these concepts to see the world from this type of lens. I remember I thought that if I was removed, or the world around me was just happening. is how I used to look at the world. That I didn't have any type of, influence on the world around me. It was just happening. Things just happened the way they did, and that's how they were going to play out. And I feel like that's where a majority of people are at. They think the world's just happening around them, and then they're reacting to it. Every experience we have is individualized to us. Not one of us is having the same experience. When you go to a family party, you and all of your siblings are going to perceive that family party from their given situation. And you can think about this. That's how I started to come to. I'm like, man,
well, they're given perception.
Yeah, they have their perception of the series of events.
Yeah, because the situation you're all in.
Yeah, we're all in that situation, but none of us perceive that situation the same. And I started to realize, oh my God, this is so true. Same thing about school, Okay, same thing about school. Same thing about my job. These employees. Take any type of situation, and you realize, wow, this is all coming from the perception. We can all be Americans, but a Black American, a Hispanic American, etc., are going to experience this, from their perception. Like,
if they choose to.
If they choose to, correct. But that's what I'm getting at is I didn't realize that we had a choice to. I thought it was how it was. Everything outside of us was just happening, and it's not. This is exciting, and this is very fun when you start to get into this because you realize, oh my goodness, why would I choose to look at this situation like that? And then things start to flow and go in the direction that you prefer, and that's powerful.
It is, and that, like I heard someone say this once before, and life is not happening to us; it's happening for us. So life is happening, but how we perceive it, it's either for or against us. So when life is happening to you, it's kind of like a negative connotation, and like you have no choice. But when it's happening for you, I'm like, wow, they're throwing a party for me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you then perceive it differently, and so when people are looking at life as happening to me, I get their argument, but I don't get into discussion with them because it'd be like throwing pearls to swines, and not to put like I'm better than them or less than them. You're going to get pulled into that argument as well because that is their right to believe that. That's 100% their right to believe that their life is shitty because they're this. Mm-hmm. I get it. You have that right, and you can prove it. Go for it.
And you'll find evidence to prove it.
Hell yeah. There's always evidence in the physical world. It always does,
And that's where we get so stuck is we go, look at all this evidence. This is why.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
But you have to say, I let go of this. This does not align with what I believe.
And that's where the doubting Thomas mind comes in.
Yep.
Doubt the evidence that works against you and doubt for the evidence that works for you. It's your choice. That's kind of why when me and Mike do this perspective shift here, it's not just not for everyone else. It's so I can wake up in the morning and sit there and mull over my conversations and have this talk here with Mike. I'm ironing my thoughts out. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. I'll go back and listen to it. I'm like, oh, I misspoke there, and okay, it's okay. I'm refining
all the time.
Yeah, and I'm refining and stuff like that. But I'm just putting these thoughts out there because, like, me and Mike will come together. We mentioned this before. Like, we'll pick someone like Neville Goddard. Okay, let's see Neville Goddard, and then he goes upon his way. I go upon my way. We may or may not even talk during the week. Mm-hmm. A lot of times we don't. If we do, it's not even about the podcast, or it's about the business side of it, perhaps. But then we get here, and all of a sudden, we're sitting there. It's not until I sit down and hit that video that I even heard. Maybe I heard this one before, but not this segment and how we're going to talk about it. So we're discovering it as we're going because I trust what's going to happen is going to unfold as it does because I imagined the podcast way before it happened.
Yep.
I saw the podcast at the end of it, and then what came about, And part of it is trying to. I'm trying to get these thoughts out there. I'm reading. How can I put this in my words in order to express this differently? Just like Neville Goddard read the Bible and expressed it differently, but he also needed Abdullah, the rabbi, to help him along. And who did Abdullah have? He had somebody, and he had somebody, and she, or whatever it is, that taught them there and so forth. And these messages have been passed down. But what's happening is, how do I make it my own and not just reiterate what somebody else says? How do I magnetize my magnet in the field and organize my principles? And that's what we do here on Perspective Shift. It's, a few people get you people, if people out there are listening and like what we're saying, it's great. But this is an exercise for me and Mike, and we also, encourage anyone that wants their voice out there to do something like this, to talk about it, and to just throw it out there. I don't pretend to know anything. I really don't. I just know my experience, and every time my experience evolves, I know something more. But there is something steadfast in a focus, and I keep doing this. Something definitely happens. But I wouldn't tell someone to use my discipline. You got to pick your own discipline. You got to choose your own thing to aim at and move towards that, and then see what happens. You become a magnet, and then life becomes easier.
I'm glad you bring up Abdullah. That's who this next and final clip that we have,
All right.
For this.
You got the Abdullah clip.
So we can
right?
jump in here.
But all right, here we go.
Well, hold on. Before we start this, my favorite thing about this clip is it's a perfect example of of a test of faith, a test of, being able to shut out the exterior world, and have full faith, steadfast, achievement of your goals, if you will. And this is a great way to illustrate that is this story. And so this is Abdullah. This was Neville Goddard's teacher. This was also Dr. Joseph Murphy's teacher. If you guys remember our episode on Dr. Joseph Murphy, let's
check it out. All right.
I said to my friend Abdullah, Ab, I would love to go to Barbados. He said to me, you are in Barbados. I said, I am in Barbados? He said, yes, you are now in Barbados. I didn't quite understand what he was telling me. I learned it afterwards. He was telling me that if I want something, I must now, at that moment that I want it, assume that I have it. I want to go to Barbados. I am in Barbados. So this night when I sleep in Barbados. How? In my imagination. And how do I know I'm there? Think of New York City, where physically I'm sleeping, and see it to my north, 2,000 miles, northwest of where I am in Barbados. Well, the months went by, and I didn't see any evidence. I said to him, Ab, if I don't make the next boat out, or no planes were flying, no commercial planes were flying in those days, I can't go to Barbados. He said to me, who said you are going to Barbados? You are in Barbados. We can't discuss how you're going to Barbados when you are already in Barbados. Then he walked straight to his room and slammed the door in my face, which was not an invitation to follow him. If you knew him, that's how he taught me. I am asleep as though I am in Barbados. And when I went to bed, though in New York City, I had assumed that I am actually in Barbados and see New York City not under me, but to the north of me, 2,000 miles. And I woke within 48 hours after that moment, and under my door was a letter from my brother Victor. And in that letter, he enclosed a small little draft, $50, that I have told the steamship company, the Furnace Whitty Company, to issue you a ticket and charge it to me. The $50 is simply if you want some little thing like a suit of clothes. In those days, you could buy a suit for $12, a fairly decent suit. You could buy a pair of shoes for $3.50 or $4. But he said the $50 just for anything you may need to get aboard the ship. But sign the chits, I'll meet the ship and pay all expenses, and I will pay all the tips. So it's not for tips aboard the ship. I went down to the place and I told them what my letter said. I read my letter to them. They said, Mr. Goddard, we only have steerage from now on. But when we get to St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands, you may have first class because someone disembarks in St. Thomas. I accepted it. I went back to my friend Abdullah and I told him, it worked. I'm going on the 6th of December, but I have to go steerage until we hit St. Thomas, and then we go first class to Barbados. You know what he said to me? He said, who is talking of going to Barbados? You have gone to Barbados and you went first class. Well, what are you going to do with a man like that? I went straight to the boat on the morning of the 6th, expecting I would go steerage to the Virgin Islands, when the man said to me, Mr. Goddard, we have a nice surprise for you. We had a cancellation, and so now you're going first class. He wasn't surprised. I wouldn't even call him to tell him, because he was not given that way. He was trying to teach me a lesson. You believe in God, believe in me also. Well, the one speaking is God. It's the God in you, your own wonderful human imagination.
That was good.
Isn't that,
Yeah.
So I
Now we know like Abdullah, the Abdullah rabbi looks like.
Yeah, I know, right? Isn't that a great
Yeah.
clip? But so, guys, the reason I selected this specific video was to show you the extent that you must go to. A couple things I love. So number one, when you're interacting, like think about your experience like with your grandparents or just an elder in general. When they're sharing information with you, it really sets in because you're like, these people have been around the block, they get this, they've lived a lot of life. And so there's a lot of, you kind of give them a lot of.
Not all of them is as wise as Abdullah.
No, totally, of course not. But there's just something about that growing up. I remember that, like my grandparents would just make me feel better about certain things when they'd say, share little bits of wisdom. So like I can only imagine because Neville talks about how he met Abdullah when Abdullah was in his late 80s and, even almost 90. So you got this little 80-year-old man, like
slamming the door in your face.
Yeah, slamming the door in your face. You are in Barbados. And that is powerful, guys, because anybody listening in on this would go, this guy's absolutely nuts. This is ridiculous. This is delusional, which, is a great phrase in Western culture that we love to throw around. But it's not. And this is how this world, this reality operates. And it's through our series of beliefs. What we're filling the imagination, the subconscious mind with, etc., is what comes to fruition. And so I doubt anybody's surprised that Neville made it to Barbados. I know Abdullah wasn't, from this conversation. But to hear like the level that Abdullah would put Neville through, like the level of, you're already there. The wish fulfilled, the amount, like the extent that he goes to, this is a great illustration of that because a lot of us would think this is absolutely crazy and nuts. And I began to, personally myself, do similar and employ similar, tactics in my own life where, I get the world around me is going on, but this is the state. This is the case. And I've watched this work. And it is so cool to hear this. And another reason I selected this article this clip was we have been taught that this type of practice is delusional. That's what we've been taught growing up. Oh, you're delusional. What do you mean? You're just... everything about, living in the state fulfilled as if, it was already complete, that would be
it's
labeled
part of the
delusional.
mixed message because the people, like a lot of times people are stuck, so well, use your imagination.
Well, yeah.
And then that's a positive thing, but then they'll tell you the opposite, like you're and when they like your imagination is way beyond the scope of ever doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was always this like type of, but you don't that outside world saying you're delusional, or that, even the thoughts of that's you playing with yourself. That's you testing yourself, in what state, do I live in? And for somebody in New York City, especially during this time period, to assume he is back home in Barbados when he's in New York City is a very difficult task. And to see the series of events about how that occurred was just beautiful. And then to hear Abdullah say, no, you're going first class, you're not going coach, et cetera. That was also powerful. And we all have the ability to do this in our life. I guess what I'm trying to say is don't put yourself in this box of, am I being delusional? Because anybody listening to this story would assume, Neville, Abdullah, they're delusional, etc. So don't be discouraged. The amount of faith and steadfast and, knowing that you have, that is the answer to everything. And so start with things that are smaller, little things, that don't really matter to you. And then you'll start to see effects there. And then you'll start to do this with bigger things. And then you'll do it with trips. You'll do it with your job. You'll do it with relationships. But this technique works. And I just wanted to specifically choose this because it sounds, and we've been taught growing up that this concept is being delusional, and it's not. And if it is being delusional, then I'm going to be delusional, and I'm going to achieve my dreams and my goals. What Martin Luther King did was delusional. What Mother Teresa did was delusional. What the Wright brothers did with airplanes was delusional. What Elon Musk is doing with Mars is delusional. But guess what? All of it was done.
Yeah, everything actually, you can look at everything as delusional or as enlightenment. And that's the mixed message we're talking about. Because everything it is, as we said before, everything it is was once imagined. But because I can touch it and experience it and reverse engineering it, I don't call it delusion. But the thing you're reverse engineering that wasn't here once before had to be a delusion the way you explain it. So here we're going back into the complete understanding of the principles of discipline. Why we tend not to experience the things we want, because we go 5 steps this way, 5 steps this way, and if the object that day was to get 10 steps, well, you 10 steps in a directional position, you got 0. So, you can actually take a magnet and demagnetize it. You can bang it around. You bang a magnet enough times, you reassemble the molecules, and it no longer has magnetism to it. So because we unwillingly focus, we bang into stuff, we demagnetize ourselves, and wonder why we get nowhere.
Yep.
So as we stay steadfast, and what Mike was saying earlier about start with small stuff, and everything eventually becomes small.
Yep.
Like,
you taught me that.
Yeah.
Start with small stuff.
Yeah.
You're like, hey, do something you could care less about the outcome.
Yeah.
Because that's the truth. Because then you let go of it completely. You're like, whatever.
And actually,
and then you're like, holy shit.
Yeah, but then when you actually get to the place where you don't really care about the outcome, what you really care is about the feeling in which you imagined in the moment in which you're in. That's what you care about, is the feeling. You don't really care how it comes.
Nope.
It doesn't matter. Like if $1 million is something you want to experience, whether someone dropped off your front doorstep in a duffel bag or you had to create a business to do so, it doesn't really matter at that moment in time when it comes, right? So when we set out in the imagination, in the moment we're in, right now, when you close your eyes to the outside world and see yourself already having what it is you want, you're going to feel the excitement now, not a year from now. And that excitement is where all the ingredients for your life are. Everything is there. All the doing will show up there. It's kind of the roadmap. So the excitement is what's going to let you know what to do. If you're excited, you know what to do. But if you're waiting for that to happen to get excited, you'll never, ever, ever get there.
Ever.
You have to align yourself in the principles of like a magnet in order to attract something. But imagine the iron bar says, I will not become magnetized until something sticks to me. Like, it doesn't work that way. You have to become magnetized and then see what sticks to you.
Yep.
And it will be a like, because magnetism can only attract a like. And if you're just sitting there and nothing's attracting to you, well, that's a like. So become magnetized. And the way to become magnetized is go in, close your eyes, pitch yourself, and in the facet of you already having it, if it's a new house, a new job, a new body, just see yourself doing it. And refrain from looking in the mirror every day or looking at your bank account every day. Just assume the feeling of already having it and the assumption of that feeling, like Neville tells us. All of a sudden you start acting as if you do that. So if it's you want to lose weight, all of a sudden you want to go to the gym, you want to eat this certain diet, you know. You if it's business, you all of a sudden want to go out and start it and get it going. All of a sudden you find out as the intricacy aspect of the doing, of the wanting to do it, was the fulfillment, not the actual losing the weight or the $1 million. And it's like, so when the $1 million comes, you're like, oh, okay. When you lose the weight and you look in the mirror, you're like, great. It's like, okay, wow. And what that tells me is anything I put my mind to, I can create and magnetize the circumstance situation to me. The people come to me. The money will come to me. Become the magnet. Magnetize yourself in this moment right now.
Well, another thing about this too, this specific clip, and another reason why I wanted to choose it was Neville specifically says, Abdullah, it's been months now. It's been a couple of months, and still nothing. I'm still not in Barbados. I'm still here in New York City. And this is very common, guys. Or at least I was, we're very impatient beings. When we want something, we want it now.
But why are we impatient?
What? Say that again?
Why are we impatient?
Why are we impatient?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Because we think we should be somewhere else. But if you're not using your imagination now, like if I close my eyes and I'm doing a meditation, I feel like I own a house on Maui. Where the fuck else would I want to be?
Yeah,
I want to be on my bed, close my eyes. I don't want to be anywhere else. So patience is a very funny thing. Like, what is patience? It's like willing to put up with a place that you don't want to be. I'm like, I don't want to be patient then. Mm-hmm. Or there's another way of being patient. Patient is knowing it's coming.
It's on its way.
It's worth its way.
And that's what Abdullah
was getting at. It's actually here. But this is part of the here.
And we need multiple things to align up, to create that vision that you want, So his brother needed a reason to send that letter, etc., and a certain post office to deliver it, and all these different things. It took 2 months. It took a few months for him to
if it took 2 hours, it wouldn't have been a story.
That's it.
It would have been... you know what I'm saying? If I click my heels and I end up in Kansas, what good would that be, right? I actually want the journey from here to Kansas to be experienced. We came here as human beings to experience life. And if we have these disciplines, we utilize them properly, the experience is magnetic. I like that.
It is.
But if we don't, it's somewhat arduous and laborious and difficult. But through the difficulty and stuff like that, we can learn to become magnetized. And we do that. It's like, wow, okay. So then when you're when you come and demagnetize, well, how do I magnetize? Go into your great imagination. If I have an iron bar, how do I magnetize it? Wrap wire around it and stick a positive, negative, stick it in the outlet, and all of a sudden after time, the molecules start to reconfigure in the same direction. You unplug it and you take it out and you got a magnet. Mm-hmm. My magnetism, my iron coil, or my coil of electricity, is my imagination. When I'm feeling demagnetized, I don't try to do something to get magnetized. I go within the deep, and assume the feeling of already having it. And all of a sudden, wow, the hair stand up back of my neck. And I'm like, there's nothing else I want. But all of a sudden, choom, choom, situations, circumstances, what we call
synchronicities.
Synchronicity, thank you.
Yep.
Start to show up. And we want the synchronicity story to play out. We don't want to just end like come in the movie and in the beginning, once upon a time, and then the end. Like, what about the middle? What happened there? Like, you don't put a kid to bed at night. Once upon a time, there's a little boy. The end. Now go to bed.
But it's true. When you picture your life and you think about any good story you've ever watched on a movie screen or any book you've ever read, it is a journey. It's the ups and downs, the overcoming, the knowing, the lows to the highs. Yes, she, they did it.
The build
like,
up.
oh my God,
Yeah.
the hero's journey. We're all on our hero's journey. And the quicker we realize that, the quicker we take control of that. And the moment, that's when everything in your life changes. At least I experienced that when I began to, understand, learn, practice these concepts. I was like, oh my God, everything in life starts to change. But that doesn't mean negative things don't come up, bad things don't happen, pitfalls come up. Now when they come up, I know this is all serving me, and it's all moving me towards where I am going. And so I don't look at it as like, oh my God, of course this would happen to me. I look at it as, okay, what am I supposed to learn from this situation? What can I grow from this situation? How can I transmute this energy? How can I be the alchemist I am and take this experience and turn it into the energy that's going to move me towards what I'm looking to achieve?
Which is a magnetism.
Yes.
So when you're actually feeling discouraged, it's just you becoming demagnetized.
Yep.
And so once I recognize I'm becoming demagnetized, I don't freak out. The iron bar will always have the capacity to be magnetized at any given moment. You have to know
this body.
Yeah, you just know how to activate it, and the great imagination activates it, And it's like, but it doesn't say that way. I'm like, yeah, because you bang it around the world. We all bang. Even the most focused person takes their eye off the ball once in a while and gets nailed.
Of course.
And once you get nailed, the bar, it starts to demagnetize. No big deal. Doesn't mean you start over to, your magnetism might not be as strong. But as we stay steadfast on this journey, all of a sudden you become like one of those car magnets, those magnets you see in like a freaking in a junkyard.
Yeah.
Right now I'm a refrigerator magnet. I get all myself on the side of a refrigerator.
But soon, full on lifting semis up to bring them to the crusher.
That's what we're talking about, baby.
Yeah.
But you got to start the refrigerator.
That's it. Start somewhere. Move in that direction.
Yeah.
Guys, jump into Neville. There's so much.
Oh, a lot of content.
So much content. But I mean, besides his books, he's got a ton of actual lectures from a long time ago. Like, truly, for when he was speaking, in New York, you would think there wouldn't be a lot of audio, video, that type of stuff. I don't think there's any video, but there's a ton of audio. And man, these lectures that are out there, there is so much gold in these guys. Go listen to them. This is something that's going to give you a whole new perspective on, number one, the Bible, number two, what your life is, but most importantly, your power as a creator.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to take back your life. That's where you now become the main character in your movie. That's what Neville's trying to help you do. He was taught by great teachers such as Abdullah. There's a lot of good information out there on Neville and Abdullah to help you on your journey.
And why I love Neville, and he's one of my favorites, is because I read I think every one of his books several times. They're very short books, small books, but they're impacted. I've read other people talk about these principles, and they're like 300 pages. With Neville's, not. When you could read a paragraph and you'd sit there, and after reading a paragraph, you're like, wow. In just a paragraph, he explained something that took somebody a whole chapter to explain. Mm-hmm. He does it brilliantly. I don't know how he does. It's just amazing the way he explains things. When you read even his lectures, I hear his lectures, they're really good. But when you read his book, it's like, wow. It came, and it might, I don't know, it may just be me, but I've had this conversation with a lot of people that are well read in Neville. The way he lays it out, it's like a beautiful song. It's a brilliant song, and it's so compacted. It's right there. One sentence was like, wow, I got to think about that, because something hit me, and now it's like I now understand it. I now know it, where it didn't. Sometimes reading a long book, I'm like, oh, be arduous and little. With Neville, no, you pick up his books like this. Then I'm trying to think if I have a couple of his books around here somewhere. But yeah, I suggest doing it again. I know he has a lot of his. A lot of people put up the audio files of his books on YouTube, so you can even get it for free if you want.
And there's great people too. Like during this last week when I was listening to all this different stuff on Neville, there's a lot of great podcasts and people out there spreading this information. Neville has a lot of good content.
That woman, Nevolution.
Yeah, Nevolution.
I listen to her a lot.
There's a Goddard. There's like a few different people who really go in and dissect what he's teaching, and they talk about it in modern, Western language of today, and it helps you understand a little bit more. I listened to a few of those, and I remember listening to those years ago too, and they help you understand and grasp these concepts, and then you start to implement the concepts, and guys, things begin. They don't take 2 months to change. Maybe something as big as being in New York to Barbados, but
not even that.
Exactly. It's just the mind putting the distance there, and that is what's so cool is you will immediately begin to see certain things change, and I know this because it happened for me.
Yeah, because in the fulfillment of something, there is what we call a point A to point B. And in the middle, we call that the gestation period. The gestation period is to align you to when that comes, you're ready for it. Just like the reason, humans, it's a pregnant, it's 9 months.
Yep.
Now, I always joke, the reason it's 9 months is because the dude has to make up the room and put paint that, the dude, like it's the guy's,
That's so funny.
But what it is, it takes you time to get ready for this child that's coming in, because once the child comes in, you better be ready.
Yep.
But can you imagine, like, you all of a sudden your wife wakes up, or whomever you're with, your partner, and it's like, hey, honey, I'm pregnant, and the next day the baby comes out. Like, what
shit.
you're scrambling. So there is a gestation period. It's the period in which you're supposed to acclimate yourself from. Now, whether you acclimate yourself or not, the baby's still coming.
Yep.
So acclimate yourself. Get used to it. So when that baby comes, you're there. Yep. You're there. When the $1 million comes, you're there. You know how to handle it. You don't lose it. All right?
You know how to invest it.
Use that. Don't try to force the gestation period to be shorter. It will come in due time, because the universe knows that, hey, Frank, your gestation period of getting this needs to be longer because this, and this. And, why didn't it come sooner? Well, now when I go for the same thing, the gestation period is shorter because I'm already there. So that old saying is like, the first million is the hardest, but the second isn't, because the gestation period of understanding can be there. You know what to do. And then it amplifies, right? So the gestation period is to acclimate yourself into the place in which you want to be when it arrives. And where does it start? Right here with my imagination, right now. And then all of a sudden I have to act it out through the acclimation. There is something about the imagination, and then with the fourth doing, the outward doing, to acclimate now I'm getting my body involved, not just my mind. And when you put those two together, the left and the right hemisphere, because the left hemisphere will never lie to you, tell you exactly what's going on. And the right hemisphere will be like, oh, when you marry the two together, there is a set of sequences that you can explain to anybody how I got the $1 million when I go back. But where did it start? It started here and not here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if I reverse engineer a billionaire, you think I'm going to get there? No. There are points along my way that will be similar. But you ask the billionaire, how'd you get a billionaire? Well, I picture myself a billionaire. Oh, okay. I could have saved myself reverse engineering instead of trying to record everything they did up to the moment in which they did. So, yeah, check out Neville Goddard. Go into the deep, and imagination, assume the feeling, and watch what happens.
That's it. If you guys like what you heard today, you can subscribe at the link below, or if you have anybody you would like to see covered or discussed on Perspective Shift, you can send us an email at perspectiveshift2020@gmail.com. Other than that,
also DM us on Instagram as well.
Yeah.
There's quick messages there too. We like to get directly to us as well, if that's easier, because I know some people don't like to email.
Absolutely. Interact with us on whatever platform.
And we'll get back to you, right?
We look forward to seeing you guys next week. We hope everybody's having a great holiday season. We'll see you guys soon.
All right. Peace out.
Thanks all.
All right.